Welcome back to our second section dealing with social stratification. This particular discussion, we're going to be looking at the explanations of social stratification from the viewpoints of the different perspectives. If you recall from our previous lessons, the three different perspectives include the functionalist perspective, symbolic interactionist perspective, and the conflict theory perspective. So looking at how stratification is explained by these perspectives is what we're going to be discussing today. To start us off, we need to become a little familiar with one of these terms. We're going to see this term again in our third lesson, but it is mentioned in our textbook, so I wanted to bring this up just to kind of preview it a little bit. The term we're looking at is false consciousness, the adoption of the idea of the dominant class by the less powerful class. Basically what that means is the lower class of people, we'll just say the lower class, is dominated by the upper class, and the lower class accepts that and believes that that's just how it's supposed to be. Sometimes the upper class will kind of incite or stimulate the hope that the lower class can raise themselves up to a higher class. But a lot of times that doesn't happen, or it's just a false sense of security kind of thing. So that's why it's called false consciousness. These lower class people know they're in the lower class, but believe that that's where they're supposed to be. And sometimes it's in the hope that they might get up higher, but there's really no guarantee. This is the main slide we're going to look at for this particular lesson. It really easily describes how the three theories kind of see stratification. So functionalism sees stratification as the fact that people are where they're supposed to be in society because that's how they're performing at. So you are considered a rich person because you have a high-paying job, because you are in charge of a multinational corporation, or you have so many responsibilities, and because of that you're supposed to be paid more, as compared to the middle or the lower class, where you have the jobs that are appropriate and get paid the appropriate amount of money for those jobs. That's how the functionalists explain this stratification, this separation of the different classes or separation of people. The conflict theory looks a little bit different, the relationship between social classes and the likelihood of punishment for a crime. So it looks at how these different social groups are actually at odds with one another. Why is it that people of lower social groups typically have a higher arrest numbers? So for example, why is it African Americans tend to get arrested more than other people that are not of the same color? Things like that. So they're looking at the inequity of how people are treated. Along with that, the chances of prosecution decrease as the level of social classes increase. So people are treated differently based upon their social class, and how that is just not fair and completely inequitable. Symbolic interactionist looks at how people are acting within their social groups. So for example, does the level of depression and suicide change depending on what social class you're in? Do people act differently based on their social class? Is their self-esteem, their self-worth seen differently among social class? So typically we'll see people that are in the upper class, the higher class, they have a high self-esteem, a high self-value, they think a lot of themselves and their achievements, that they deserve what they've got because they've earned it, as compared to the lower classes where they might have worse self-esteem, they're struggling, they can't get a leg up, they might be blaming some of their problems on their lot in life, things like that. So that's the symbolic aspect of stratification. Couple more different notes you can get down, and this is just kind of the written portion if you want to get it in words. Functionalist theory says that stratification assures that the most qualified people fill the most important positions. recognizes that inequality exists because certain jobs are more important than other jobs. Conflict theory looks at the inequity existing because some people are willing to exploit others. They're willing to take advantage of others. The rich willing to take advantage of the poor. Stratification is based off of force or power. Karl Marx, if you recall, he came up with this idea of false consciousness, where the working class accepts the idea that they are in the class they're supposed to be. Stratification occurs through the struggle for scarce resources, which is the definition of stratification. And then finally, symbolic interactionism. That's stratification. People are socialized into accepting the existing stratification structure, that people have always been in these social classes, and therefore they just are what they are, whether they like it or not. American children are taught that social classes is the result of talent and effort, that if you work hard, get the right job, that you can do anything with your life. Things like that. It's the American dream concept. You work hard, you do what you need to do, and you'll be successful. That kind of concept. People's self-concepts help preserve the status quo. How do they think about themselves, their self-worth? And if they think that they're unworthy, well, then they'll probably stay in a lower class of others who might think they're unworthy, for example, as compared to, again, an upper class. People that are well off, rich, or born well off, typically have a higher self-interest and higher self-value to themselves, and they tend to do better because of that, in part. They also look at the link between social classes and self-esteem, which is kind of what I just touched upon, where people typically think better of themselves, not because they're of a higher social class, but because they are in it. Okay, it's not something that they necessarily are cognizant of, but it is something that just is. And with that, we are done with our quick little lesson on looking at our three perspectives and how they relate to our stratification. Our next discussion will be on poverty in America and how stratification is affecting poverty in America, how we're going to look at the different social class levels, look at what makes a person poor compared to what makes a person rich, and look at that again from the United States arena. So thanks for coming and watching the lesson. I hope you got some new information out of it, and we'll see you next time.